card, if you don't mind, and pass that to the end of the aisle, church, and that way we can have a record of your attendance, especially our visitors. We'd love to have that. That helps us out here in reaching people and trying to grow in different ways. We sure do appreciate if you can do that for us. All year long, we've been looking at the very aspects of Jesus on Sunday night as best we can. We've been examining the different abilities that He had. We've been looking at the person, the role that Jesus plays as Messiah. We've been looking at Savior, and we've looked at the miracles. We've looked at the I am, almost all of the I am statements that Jesus makes. But we're going to continue doing that for the rest of the year, Lord willing. But tonight I want us to focus on something that we may overlook. And that's what's on the screen for us tonight. The compassion of Jesus. Well, we know He's compassionate. That's a given. In fact, when you read this text and when you read all the others, when Jesus comes across somebody, He sees them hurting and He sees them bothered or sick, lame, whatever the problem would be, the Bible says that then He had compassion on them. Well, do we really know what it means to have compassion? Some people would view compassion as being weak. Maybe something that only soft people do. But in the true nature of it, compassion is really one of the strongest terms that can be said about a person. A lot of people simply don't care about others. They don't look at people that are sick or afflicted. They don't even give them the time of day because they look at it and this is the way they think. They'll say, well, they deserve that. They've met their bed, now they got to lay in it. Or, I'm just glad it's not me. And we'll walk on by when we see people that need our help. And I'll be the first to say, there are several times when we have been abused here at church with helping people. Probably, maybe even 90% of the time. People come in all the time, they look for help. They ask us for $10 worth of gas, or they ask us for some food, which the pantry has helped out tremendously. They'll ask us for some help for some medicine or some other thing. And when we help those that aren't a part of our family here, a lot of times we hear that same story over and over again. And part of me and part of the elders and Jerry and Glenn who've worked with this in the past, they look and they say, well, is this a legitimate cause? Is this something that we can really do some good with and help these people? Or is this something that they're just simply trying to take advantage of us and just take the church for a ride? Well, I know there are cases when we can know that for sure, but church, we don't see Jesus turning away a lot of people. Even when they would come to Him with the wrong intentions, we see Jesus would call those wrong intentions, but He would still help them. What does it mean to have compassion? I want you to look. It means to be moved. The biblical word compassion, as it's listed here in Matthew chapter 9, to be moved inwardly, to yearn with tender mercy, affection, pity, and empathy. Moved with compassion. Moved in your internal organs, meaning that you see someone that's hurting or you see someone that's in need, and you are drawn so much to it with that affection, with that yearning for that mercy to happen for that person, that you feel it inside your physical body. You feel differently when you have this. You feel your bowels. You feel your insides when you have compassion. Or when even Jesus would have that compassion. Sympathy coupled with a desire to help. And I included on this what sympathy means. Sympathy, we say it a lot, but is the capacity to share feeling, to enter the same feelings, and to feel the same thing. So when you look at the capacity to share the feeling, to enter into the same feelings that someone else is having, or to feel the same thing someone else is struggling with. It's that feeling that you get coupled with the desire to help that person and make a difference. When Jesus sees these people that are hurt, when He sees those people that are lame, those people that are blind, those people that have all these issues, He sees those things, and He's moved so deeply and feels for them so much, He has such a strong desire to do something about it. And that is the feeling that He wants us to have as well. You see, I think all of us, when we look at it, I think all of us could take a look at this in a different light and maybe put more of this into our life. To share the same feeling as others and possess a desire to help them in their trouble. If we all would just put that into practice in our lives with each other, with our family of God, and not only with just us, but outside, that's even more important. When we look outside these walls and we see people that are hurting, reveal to them what Jesus really is. Allow them to see Jesus in our lives by our feelings toward them. So when we look at Jesus having this compassion, I want to talk for a moment what motivated that. What motivated Him to have this compassion for others? And what was His method? Did Jesus have a certain pattern that He dealt with people when He came to these people that were hurting, when He saw and felt compassion on them? Let's read the text again, and then I want to talk about where this compassion He has, maybe where it stems from. Where does it come from? Let's read again. Matthew chapter 9. Jesus went throughout all the cities and the villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When He saw the crowds, He had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless. They were like sheep without a shepherd. He said to His disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly for the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into His harvest." You see where Jesus is pointing to this? Every church wants to grow. Every congregation wants to get bigger. Every person that I know that knows someone that's lost, which is all of us, wants to reach that person that's lost. That's what we want. That's our goal. If we see someone that doesn't have the gospel, that they don't have Jesus in their life, our goal is we want them to have Jesus. Now, when Jesus says He sees and feels this compassion for the crowd because they're helpless, because they're harassed, because they're like sheep without a shepherd, He looks to His disciples and He says, "You see these people hurting? Do you see all of these people that are out here, these crowds that are coming to us to receive their healing? Notice all of these people. There's your harvest. There's where the growth is. To reach these people." And honestly, at times, I really don't think we reach out to reach those people. I think we reach out to reach the people that are middle class or upper class, that have a good income, that dress nice, that have the decent cars, that have the same age kids as we do, to bring them in. That way they can contribute, and we can get their kids involved with our kids, and we can have fellowships together. I think that's more what we look for, instead of looking out for those people and having that compassion. Jesus wants us to see, that's where I want you. That's where the harvest is. If you want to reach the harvest, if you want to reap the rewards of that, the workers are few. And He needs us all to be out in there. But where does He get this feeling? Where does this yearning come from Him? Well, I want to suggest that it originates with His essence. Just in who Jesus is. Because He cares about so many different people that have so many different problems, that have so many different backgrounds. He has so much compassion for a prostitute that He has for a man that has been born blind. And He has so much compassion for the leper as He does for the woman that's had the issue of blood. And for the beggar that waits by the gate. How can He feel that same way about all of us? Because I'll tell you, there's a certain group of people that I see that are hurting. They pull my heartstrings. But there's some that don't pull my heartstrings as much. And you're the same way. People that you relate more to. If you see a woman, yesterday, and this happened yesterday. I didn't tell her I was going to say this. I didn't think about it. Yesterday, Leah was driving on the road. She was going to the birthday party. And she saw a woman walking with a baby. And the baby just had a diaper on. And the woman had bruises on her. She was sweating. She looked like she was out of breath. And Leah said, I just couldn't leave her. I had to go ask if she needed help. She was drawn to that. Why was Leah? Because her essence is in a mother. It's like a mother. To see someone that has a child that looks helpless and needs help, we have a soft spot. She has a soft spot for that. So she goes and picks up this lady. Carries her somewhere. She'd gotten a fight with her husband. Didn't get a name. Don't know who she was. But she'd been walking for 2 miles and nobody had stopped. I wonder how many people drove by. I'm not just bragging on my wife for a moment. I'm not doing it. I want you to think. On Bridge Road. A busy area. How many people, it takes a person about 30 to 35 minutes to walk 2 miles. Especially holding an infant. Wonder how many cars passed. How many people just completely avoided it. See, it didn't hit people. They didn't relate to that. She did. She reached out to help. Certain things pull the strings for certain people. But with Jesus, it's everything. Everything affects Him. Well, that's part of His essence. And I want you to see, we talked about this, several weeks ago when we first started this, because Jesus, although He is flesh, He is God in the flesh. He's not encumbered with our fallen nature. Jesus is not selfish like we are. He's not self-centered like we are. Because all of those things are against His very essence. See, other people, when they were driving on the road and they saw that woman, or they maybe not even paid any attention to her, they might have thought for a moment, you know what, I could stop and help her, but I would love to get to the store and get back before game day starts. Or I would love to stop and help, but I have a tea time that I've got to make. Or if I don't get there when the store opens, I'll never get the deal that I'm looking for. Selfish and self-centered, looking at self instead of looking out on this side. Jesus wasn't part of that. He transcends all our faults, all our flaws that we have to deal with. When you look at John chapter 1 verse 18, it tells us that no man has seen God at any time. That the people had not seen God. And if you look at the Old Testament, if you just read the Old Testament, someone can get a wrong impression of God. You're going to see somebody that's vengeful. You're going to see the wrath of God. You're going to see the jealousy of God. You're going to see that He pouring down His wrath on people. But when you look at the New Testament, you see a total different side in Jesus. It's not that it's a totally different God. It's the same God, but we see both sides. And up until this point, no man had seen God at any time because He cannot be with humans. But when Jesus came in the form of flesh, in John chapter 14, verse 9, when they asked, just show us the Father and that's enough for us. And Jesus says, have I been with you so long? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Just because of who He is and what He is, that has driven Him more to be compassionate toward other people. Just look at the difference in how Jesus sees things and how we see things. There's a little, I guess you want to call a parable. A man fell into a pit and could not get himself out. The Christian Scientist came alongside and said, you only think that you're in a pit. The Pharisee came up and saw the man in the pit and said, only bad people fall in the pit. The fundamentalist come to him and said, you deserve to be in the pit. The charismatic person came up and looked at the person in the pit and said, just confess that you're not in a pit. The Christian came by and said, we brought some food for you and clothing while you were there in the pit. The Calvinist said, that's no accident, you're in there for a reason. The optimist said things could be worse. The pessimist said things will get worse. And Jesus comes and takes them out of the pit. Do you see the difference? Even when we look at the Christian side, we come to a person that's in a pit, we take them food, we bring them clothing, we meet those needs for them, and then drop. And drop. Jesus reaches down, picks them up, lifts them out of the pit, and puts them on solid ground. His essence is different. But that doesn't mean that we can't apply some of those things to our life as well, so that we can look at the practices and the method that He chooses to handle these things. The second thing where this compassion of Jesus originates is in His experiences. He shares a lot of the same experiences that we do. And although we're special, we are unique in our own way, that we're God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus, that each one of us is a masterpiece, and we all have our specific shape, our spiritual gift, our heart, our ability, our experience, and how that just narrows down to where there's only one of us, and we have one job to do that God has given to us, that one gift, and He wants us to use it. See, Jesus relates to us in that matter as well, because He's had a lot of experiences that you might not have thought about. You think you've got a tough life. You think your road has been tough. Maybe you have trouble with your house. Maybe you have trouble making your house payment. Maybe you don't know where you're going to live next month. Maybe you don't know if you're going to be able to make the rent. And you look and say, Christ could never understand that. Jesus would never understand not being able to do that. He was the King of Kings. Surely He would have a place to do that. Well, not really. Matthew chapter 8, verse 20. Foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. If you were to mail a card, you would never have a home address for Jesus to give it to. Have you thought about that? If you just say, you know what, I'd love to wish Jesus a happy birthday, or I would love to just send Him a note of thank you for what He's done to me and put it in the mail, there's no address. He has no home. He traveled on the road to see people. You want to talk about housing trouble? Look at the housing problem He had. But you never see Him complain about it. Do you have family responsibilities that weigh you down? Maybe you look at it and you say, you know what, I've just got so many responsibilities with my family, taking care of my parents or taking care of my children. And you look at it and say, Jesus never understood anything like that. He could not understand what I'm going through when dealing with that. Well, Jesus can have compassion on that person because, yes, He can understand what that's like. Every study out there lets us know that Joseph was quite a bit older than Mary. After Jesus is 12 years old, there's no mention of Mary. No mention of Joseph, rather. So you have that 12 years old until Jesus begins His ministry at 30. You have those years there where it may have just been Jesus caring for His mother. Maybe He was the one that was earning the income for the family. Maybe he would learn the trade from his father as a young boy and had that responsibility as a 15, as a 16-year-old to make enough money to bring home bread for his mother and for his brothers, half-brothers. Jesus understood what it meant to have those family responsibilities so He could have that compassion. Look at Mark chapter 6, verse 3. Maybe you feel undervalued. Maybe you think people put you down. Maybe you think just people are just downright awful to you because they don't see what you're worth. You think Jesus ever felt that way? Well, when you look, verse 1 of chapter 6 of Mark, He went away from there. He came to His hometown. His disciples followed him. On the Sabbath day he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph, Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. And Jesus said, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and among his relatives and his own household." They took him and they tried to stone him. Other accounts tell us. You don't think people value how important you are. You feel underappreciated. You feel undervalued. Here is the Son of God who people look at him and say, "You're a nobody." How can Jesus have compassion on those people? Because He understands. Because He felt the same way that they felt. We can continue on with this. Do people slander you? They make unkind comments to you? Well, if you go back over in Matthew chapter 11, verse 19, listen to what they say about Jesus in Matthew chapter 11, verse 19. "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Look at Him, a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners.'" They called Him illegitimate at times. How could Jesus relate to those people and have compassion that's felt that? It's because He Himself. What about it misunderstood? You feel like you're misunderstood, that people just don't understand me? Well, you look in Matthew chapter 9, verse 11, and look at how Jesus must have felt here. Verse 10, Matthew 9, 10 and 11. "When Jesus reclined at the table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and His disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, 'Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?'" Why is He with those types of people? Is that the kind of person that Jesus is? Mingling with the sinners? You feel misunderstood? Maybe you feel too much pressure. Maybe you just feel the pressure on you at work and you just can't handle yourself anymore. You just feel like there's a weight on you that you just can't get lifted because there's work. It's so stressful. Look at what happens to Jesus in Matthew chapter 8, verse 24. Verse 23, He says, "He got into a boat, His disciples followed Him. There arose a great storm in the sea, so that in the boat was being swamped by the waves, but Jesus was asleep." He felt so much pressure from the other passages of going, verse 14, of healing so many people, that He crawls up into this boat and goes out. And Mark tells us that this boat, right in the very front of the boat, there was a little place where they would keep the nets. And it was just a small place, just big enough to crawl in and fit. Jesus goes into that one spot, into that boat, in the hull of the boat, exhausted, and can sleep through a storm. You ever been so tired or felt so much pressure, you go home and you just sleep the night away, nothing can wake you up, you just sleep so sound because you're so exhausted? Hey, Jesus felt that way. Hey, church, we haven't even gotten into, and we're not even going to have time to get into all those things that Jesus felt when He was arrested. The nails that were pierced in His hand. The spikes on the crown of thorns. Did you even know that there's a good chance that they took their fingers and plucked the very hairs of His beard out? You want to know pain? How can Jesus look at somebody that has that kind? How can He feel that? How can He look at someone that's been ridiculed, and you see someone that's been ridiculed and mocked and made fun of and spit on because of who they are? Jesus understood that. His very essence in who He was, of not being selfish, gave Him a heads up, a special gift to be able to feel and relate to every single person, no matter what the problem they had, no matter what the issue, so that He could feel it and be moved inside when He saw their suffering. Now, why does that mean anything? Well, is because when we get to Hebrews 4, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens. Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, because we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize. We have one that can sympathize. Aaron couldn't sympathize with everybody. Eli couldn't sympathize with everybody. When you looked at the chain of those high priests, they couldn't fit everybody. But the one that we have in Jesus, He is one who in every respect has been tempted as we are. Yet He remained without sin. So we can draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that we may find mercy and that we might find grace to help in time of need. When you look at the compassion that Jesus has, the feeling, the emotion that's attached, the willingness, the desire, the yearning to help someone and do whatever it takes to help that person, because He knows how you feel. Church, if we could just take the little experiences that we have, if we could just take a little of that yearning and feel it for the person that's stuck in an abusive marriage, that's lost their job and trying to find one, the person that is going to have their utilities cut off because they haven't had work in 6 months. If we could feel a little bit more of compassion on that, sure we're going to get burned. Sure, they're going to take advantage of us. But they did so to Jesus too. And as we look at what Jesus says to the crowds of people that are hurting, that are sick, that are afflicted, that are out in the crowds, and He looks over to His disciples and He says, "There's your harvest, boys. That's where you need to be. Feeling compassion for them. And if you do that, then you'll be my disciples." Think about your life tonight and think about how you relate to those people. And as you go throughout this week, look for those opportunities to help. And I don't mean by just giving them money. I mean by giving them time. Showing them that you care. Because sometimes writing a check to somebody, it may be a large sum of money that you're giving to somebody, but that doesn't really show you care. You really show your care when you sacrifice your time to help them. When you try to study with them. When you invite them into your home to have a meal. When you ask them if they need anything that you can carry them to. Once you do that, you get a little glimpse of what Jesus had. And you feel a little bit more like what Jesus did. That's our goal, isn't it? To do whatever we can to follow Him in His steps, to be like Him. Look at your life tonight. Analyze your compassion. Are you sour on people? Have you been burned? Hey, so was He. But I'm thankful that He didn't give up, that He didn't quit on us, because if He had, then we wouldn't be here today. If He'd gotten burned like we do and just quit helping and just turn our backs to Him, then we would not have that opportunity today to be here. He felt compassion. He felt mercy. He gave grace. So should we. Look at your life. Examine it. If you need to reevaluate your priorities, Christ is here. You fix it. He feels compassion for you tonight, whatever your problem is. Let Him help as we stand and sing the invitation song.